might not be surprised, the debate topic is around growth. So the House view is this House believes that the wealth management industry's future lies in organic growth, not consolidation. If we can put up the slide to vote. Right, there's a QR code there, or you can go to Slido. We want to get a vote before and after, because I'm curious to see, do you agree with the House view or not? Do our speakers persuade you or not? Right, while you're voting, let me introduce the speakers. So Scott Stevens is Managing Director, Business Development and Marketing at Mattioli Woods. He will be presenting the House view. And his esteemed opponent presenting the opposite side is Natalie Kempster, Chief Client Officer at the Purposeful Group. There we go. All right. I think, Scott, the pressure might be on there. Yeah. Right. Please join me in welcoming Scott Stevens from Mattioli Woods.
I will certainly try my best. I have to confess, obviously, Peter Mann invited me. Obviously, it's a gift to come and do this, but obviously chatting to Natalie in the foyer a little bit earlier, she is now turning her firm into a consolidator. So I think her job's actually on the line, so we'll get there in a moment. So imagine a country facing a shortage of restaurants. Millions of people want to dine out, but there simply aren't enough places to serve them. Now imagine the industry responds like this. Restaurants begin buying other restaurants. Chains merge, groups consolidate. But here's the question. Have we trained the next generation of chefs? New menus, new ways to serve more customers? Of course not. We have simply moved the same restaurants under a few owners, and the wealth management industry faces exactly the same mistake. As demand for advice rises, the supply of advisors is shrinking. If the future of our profession is about serving more people, the solution simply can't be buying yesterday's businesses. We must create more advisors, design new advice models, and build client experiences that clearly demonstrate value. Those things are not acquired, they're built. And that brings us to the motion before the House today. This House believes that the wealth management industry's future lies in organic growth, not consolidation. Now let me acknowledge something up front, Natalie. Consolidation has played an important part in our industry. It's brought capital, it's enabled investment in technology, and it's created scale. But scale and progress are not the same thing. The real question before the House is simple. How does this profession serve millions more people better in the decades ahead? We're entering a period where people are living longer with more complex retirement. Pension freedoms have increased choice and risk. Inheritance tax planning is becoming the norm for lots and lots of families in the UK. And intergenerational wealth transfer is accelerating. Demand for advice is rising rapidly, yet the supply of advisors is not keeping pace. Around 13 million people in the UK today have between £50,000 and £5 million of investable assets, yet only 4 million receive advice. That's a 9 million advice gap to my mind. If the future of wealth management is about serving more people better, then three things have to happen. We need to innovate how advice is delivered, expand the advisor workforce, and strengthen the trust economy, and importantly, by demonstrating value. So the real debate becomes this. Is the industry's future better served by firms that continuously acquire existing businesses, or by firms that grow by continuously improving the way advice is delivered? Let's have a look at each of these in turn. If we're serious about closing the advice gap, we must confront an uncomfortable reality. The advice model itself, notwithstanding all your efforts in this room, have barely changed in decades. A client meets an advisor, personalized financial planning follows, fees are based on assets under management, unlike Matt's business, but we'll come to that. For affluent clients, this works beautifully, but it does not scale to millions of people. And the reason becomes clear when you examine the economics of advice. Imagine if we operated like lawyers or solicitors or accountants, charging for time spent with clients. Studies analysing advisor productivity suggest advisors could realistically charge clients for only around about 50% of their time. When you take the fully loaded cost of a UK advisor, and I've been recruiting lots over the last couple of years, salary, technology and infrastructure, and apply a typical professional services margin of, let's say, around 35%, you arrive at an effective charge-out rate of £314. Now consider something every advisor must now do every single year, an annual review meeting. Now that's preparation, that's travel, the meeting itself, documentation, that's the follow-up, all of that. In practice, that involves at least 3 hours of an advisor's time and 2 hours of a power planner administrator's time, often much, much more. At current cost structures, the single meeting costs over £1,200. Reverse engineer that through a typical advice fee, and the conclusion is simple. A client often needs a minimum of 140,000 investable assets before the relationship becomes economically viable. Under the traditional advice model, millions of households will not be served economically. This is the structural reason why the advice gap exists, and that's why the industry now is obsessed with one thing: lowering that unit cost to serve. Technology and AI, digital planning tools, hybrid advice models, behavioral coaching supported by technology. All of these are attempts to solve that same problem. How do we deliver high-quality financial guidance to far more people? Because the future of wealth management will not be one traditional model scaled bigger. It will be multiple models designed for different clients. And innovation will ultimately determine which firms succeed. But innovation, folks, rarely emerges from large integration exercises. It comes from firms that are building, testing, experimenting. Organic growth allows firms to design propositions and build advice models around how clients actually want to engage. Consolidation, by contrast, turns leadership attention inwards. It's on integration, systems alignment, operational harmonization. It's important work, but it absorbs organizational energy. After an acquisition, the priority becomes integration, not innovation, aligning systems, standardizing processes. It's all necessary work, but when leadership attention is consumed by integration, it rarely invents the next advice model, and that's what we need to do. The firms that win the next decade will not be those that have the largest balance sheets. They'll be those with the most efficient advice engines. Organic growth allows firms to design their operating model deliberately. Consolidation, on the other hand, often inherits complexity. Different systems, different pricing, different advice processes. Anyone who's lived through a major acquisition knows this truth. You rarely inherit a perfectly aligned operating model. You inherit layers of history, and layers of history are expensive. The future of wealth management will not be built by buying yesterday's businesses. It will be built by designing smarter models from the ground up. That second pillar, let's have a look at that. The structural challenge, talent. The UK advice profession has a demographic problem. The average age of a financial advisor, and I should know, is 58 years old. Roughly 40% are expected to retire within the next decade. So at the very moment demand for advice is increasing, the supply of advisors is shrinking. Research suggests the UK may need now tens of thousands. I reckon it's about 50,000 on current models. 50,000 new advisors in the coming decades to meet that demand. And here's the crucial point. Consolidation, Natalie, doesn't solve this problem. When one firm acquires another one, advisors do not multiply. They simply move from one balance sheet to another. It's like rearranging the seats on an aeroplane and then claiming, I've added some passengers. Today, roughly 40 consolidators are competing to buy Britain's 5,000 advice firms. But buying firms does not create new advisors. It simply moves the same capacity around the industry. And that is the fundamental constraint we face. New advice models will help expand access, but we still need more advisors to deliver it. Advisor academies, thank you for Verve. Career change programs, power planner pathways. Organic growth forces firms to invest in exactly these things because you grow organically, you cannot rely on buying capacity from elsewhere. You must build it. The industry must produce advisors fast when they retire. Yet while 40 consolidators, it's about 40 out there, are busy buying advice firms, only a handful of organizations are meaningfully investing in advisor academies. And only 2 of these, Natalie, only 2 of them are consolidators, which leads to this simple truth. You can consolidate firms, but you can't consolidate your way to more advisors. 5,000 firms will not solve our advice gap by buying each other. We must expand the profession, not merely consolidate it. And then let's lastly have a look at pillar 3, trust. Wealth management ultimately runs on trust. Clients entrust advisors with their pensions, their businesses, their inheritances, and often the financial well-being of multiple generations. Trust is built slowly through relationships, consistency, demonstrating value. In the years ahead, the value must become more visible. Many clients are financially stretched caring for aging parents while helping children who cannot fly the nest. The pressure will grow. If you've got £1 million invested and pay, let's say, roughly £8,000 a year, that's £600 a month subscription fee. It's entirely reasonable to ask, what am I receiving? What am I receiving for that? Especially if the relationships account amounts to one advisor meeting in a year of 8,760 hours. We touched on earlier with the Hargreaves example of how do I demonstrate value, more touch points. Which means the future advice must involve far more touch points, deeper engagement and continuous evidence of value. Organic growth encourages exactly this. Because firms expand through referrals, reputation and client advocacy. Consolidation, by contrast, often introduces disruption. Advisor attrition, changing client relationships, different cultures and advice philosophies. And when relationships are transferred rather than built, trust is eroded. But wealth management is a trust business, and trust does not survive being repeatedly transferred. Which brings us back to the real stakes of this debate. The question before us today is not how firms grow bigger, it is how this profession becomes bigger and how millions gain more access to advice. So let's return to the motion before the House. The future of wealth management will be defined by firms that innovate new advice models, expand the advisor workforce, and strengthen trusted client relationships. Organic growth strengthens all three. Consolidation simply increases scale. And scale alone doesn't solve the structural problems facing the profession. Consolidation may build bigger firms, but the future of wealth management will not be built by simply combining yesterday's businesses. It will be built by firms that innovate new models, lower the cost of advice, and expand access to millions more people. The future will not be acquired. It will be built, and it will be built organically. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Natalie.
Wow. I haven't got any slides, which is probably a good thing. Okay. In advance of today, I had a pre-meeting with Heather, and I asked for her top tips, and her response was to be funny. So she said, that's how you win. After that, I tried to get out of taking part, and I thought how I could oh no, I should do this. I'll do it. I thought about how I could argue against organic growth. Not the desire for it, but the evidence of it. I could point to CityWire articles on PE firms demonstrating no real growth. Scott's own strategy of attracting planners with client books. I'm not quite sure that's organic growth. I think it's moving money around. And then I reread the motion. This House believes that the wealth management industry's future lies in organic growth, not consolidation. And there's some nuance there that I want to explore. So, ladies and gentlemen, my esteemed opponent, we actually agree on the what. We both want to reach more people and secure better financial futures. Where we differ and where this motion fails is the how. The proposition asks you to believe in a false choice, that our future is organic growth instead of consolidation. And this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how industries mature. My argument is simple. Organic growth is the destination, but consolidation is the vehicle. Without the vehicle, the destination is just a distant mirage, and we're all stuck in the departure lounge. Before we look forward, let's look at the evidence today. We see private equity growth that is often just asset shuffling. We see strategies focused on acquiring advisors with existing books. And is that organic growth? No. It's moving money from one pocket to another. If organic growth were the healthy, self-sustaining future that the proposition claims, why do 3/4 of new clients still come from referrals? The least scalable engine imaginable. The first reason to reject this motion is the constraint of capacity. Advice is not a digital-only product. It is a human capital business. Even with the best AI, you need planners, paraplanners, and compliance officers. The proposition assumes we can simply sell more advice. But if we look at the data, advisor supply, as Scott pointed out, is flat to falling and aging. Small firms are shrinking under the weight of regulation, and you cannot scale advice faster than you can scale the operating model that delivers it. At recent forums with NextWealth I've attended, the declining advisor pipeline and challenges replacing retirees were flagged explicitly. I realise it sounds like I'm making Scott's point for him, but bear with me. Independent coverage reinforces this point. Over 1,000 advice firms have disappeared since 2022, and younger advisor inflows remain weak. You can't sell what you don't have the manpower to deliver. And organic growth in a fragmented market is not a strategy, it's a bottleneck. And that leads me to my second point. Consolidation is how we build the factory of advice. Consolidation, done well, is not buying assets, it is pooling resources to fund what small firms cannot. Robust technology, sophisticated data, and resilient governance. The market's real growth engine has been and remains consolidation. Multiple sources point to sustained high M&A activity, with most wealth managers planning acquisitions and PE capital still reshaping the market. NextWealth have published research on consolidation, and will do again soon, commenting that deal values are rising, the consolidation of consolidators is here, and 84% of acquirers are building in-house MPS. These are classic signs that inorganic and integration is the dominant growth model. We know that deal trackers are showing a high watermark for large transactions in the investment and wealth space, and 65% of those have been PE backed. Again, this is inorganic capital fueling scale. The FCA published their own multi-firm review on consolidation last year, and they acknowledge this. They don't say, don't consolidate, they say manage the integration well. Why? Because scale creates the financial resilience to innovate. Balance sheets and not brochures have driven this sector's growth for a decade, and in a mature market, growth is driven by the efficiency of capital, not just the charisma of an individual advisor. Thirdly, let's talk about consumer duty, which I think is what I spoke about last time I was here. The regulator is moving us towards consistent, evidenced outcomes. A modern advice business has to evidence who its target market is, how it delivers fair value, that clients understand the service, and that support is effective. That's not a marketing challenge, it's an operating model challenge. And fragmented firms, all using different tools, assumptions and processes, create variability. Variability is where client harm lives, and it's where regulatory risk lives. Consolidation, however, allows us to standardise excellence. It tilts the scale towards models that can afford the high cost of compliance. So the proposition's vision of pure organic growth ignores the reality that modern regulation demands. An industrial strength operating model. Reaching new, less wealthy segments requires investing ahead of revenue. Building digital onboarding and scalable service models is something that small, organic-only firms simply don't have the dry powder to do. That brings us to our core contradiction in the motion. It asks us to believe that organic growth is the future instead of consolidation, when modern regulation is pushing firms towards consistent, governed, evidence delivery. These are the very conditions where scale helps. If we want to expand advice beyond the traditional, already wealthy, already referred client base, we need models that can profitably serve an expanded target market. And these groups often don't deliver high revenue in year one. They require education, digital service models, scalable onboarding, robust communications, and sometimes different propositions entirely. Small firms often cannot afford to build that capability. Large groups can. So those prerequisites of tech investment, proposition design, and monitoring are precisely what consolidation helps fund and standardise. So if the objective is truly more people helped, then the question becomes what model can invest ahead of revenue, build scalable delivery, and maintain consistent outcomes? The answer is not organic growth alone. The answer is organic growth enabled by scale. So to wrap up, rereading NextWealth's commentary, they note that firms are finally turning to organic growth. After years of technology investment and integration, structural changes, that's a confession. It proves that consolidation and structural scale are the prerequisites for organic growth. So the proposition that suggests the future is passengers, the clients, and not airplanes, who are the firms, I say passengers are the point, but you still need aircraft to get them off the ground. And avoid them, most importantly, being stuck at Terminal 5. So don't vote for hope, vote for a reality. Reject the motion, not because organic growth isn't desirable, but because without the infrastructure of consolidated, scaled businesses, it is impossible to achieve. Thank you.
Fantastic. Each of our presenters have 4 minutes for a rebuttal, and then we will bring it to a vote. Scott.
Thank you very much. Now, that was a bit of a fudge from my perspective, because you kind of borrowed half kind of the argument, but I understand where you were going. So I do acknowledge, obviously, that the case you just made probably sounds quite familiar to all of you. And I noted kind of 3 points at that, one of which was consolidation brings scale. Second, it brings capital and technology. And third, it creates stronger and more professional firms. So on the surface, Natalie, that was really persuasive. Thank you. But it's on the surface. But when we examine them more closely, they do not actually solve the problem facing the industry. Because the problem facing the profession is not scale, it's access. And that's the point from my perspective. Scale does not close the advice gap. We've just heard that larger firms are more efficient. Perhaps they are, Natalie. But efficiency in wealth management does not automatically translate into serving more people. Because the real constraint the profession has is not number of firms, it's the number of advisors, as I spoke about earlier. When one firm acquires another, advisors do not multiply, they simply move from one balance sheet to another. The same clients, the same advisors, the same capacity, just fewer logos on the door. That may create larger firms, but it does not create more advice, and the advice gap will not be solved by firms buying each other. I think the other point I noticed was that capital does not automatically produce innovation. Natalie wants you to believe that consolidation brings capital, and that capital enables technology and innovation. She referenced that's where she thinks that growth is going to come from. But innovation rarely emerges, as I said before, from the large integration exercises. And let's be honest, because we've had, or we're about to have SJP up here, we've also had, obviously, Steve from Quilter. And if I look at those large businesses there, the level of innovation, I mean, let's be honest, SJP's proposition hasn't really evolved in 25 years. So that scale alone does not create innovation. Okay, I lost one vote. I got the rest of you. So after acquisition, the priority becomes something entirely different. Aligning systems, standardizing processes I spoke about before. But reconciling different pricing models and investment propositions, anyone who's lived through that, I've been at firms that have done that, it's all consuming. So ask yourself, in the years after a major acquisition, are leadership teams designing new advice models, or are they integrating what they've just bought? Because you can't redesign the future while you're busy integrating the past. And then finally, Natalie argued that actually these bigger firms create stronger, more professional firms. Interesting. So Natalie is right that the consolidation can create larger, better capitalized firms, but we should look closely at what sits beneath that financial strength. Much of this expansion is driven by private equity, often supported by debt, and built with a clear intention to exit. So the model is not just about building enduring businesses, it's about building assets to be sold, which brings different incentives, shorter time horizons, pressure on returns, decisions shaped as much by valuation as by client outcomes. Especially and equally, professionalism does not come from ownership structures. It comes from standards, from training, from culture, from the judgment of advisors themselves. Natalie, law did not become professional through consolidation. Medicine did not become professional through mergers. Professions are strengthened by developing people. So yes, consolidation may create larger firms, and even financially engineered strength. But a stronger profession is not built by acquiring businesses. It's built by investing in people, and that is the work of organic growth. Which brings us back to the real question before the House today. Not how firms become bigger, but how this profession becomes bigger. How we serve millions more people. How we create more advisors. How we design advice that reaches far beyond today's client base. Because this is the challenge in front of all of us. Yes, consolidation can build bigger firms, but it does not create advisors, it does not fundamentally lower the cost of advice, and it doesn't close the advice gap. It moves the pieces around the chessboard. It doesn't change the game. Organic growth does something different. It forces innovation. It develops new talent. It expands reach. It builds the future rather than assembling the past. So today you have heard two visions. One that grows by combining what already exists with a little bit of fudge, and one that grows by creating what does not yet exist. The future of wealth management will not be decided by who owns the most advice, but by who extends it the furthest. And that future will not be acquired. It will be built organically. Mic drop. Thank you.
Well done. Right, the final rebuttal before the vote. Natalie.
Wow, this is interesting, isn't it? Because I agree with nearly everything Scott said, apart from I don't think you've given us any solutions as to how we build organically. How do we attract more clients? How do we have scalable models without genuinely having bigger, consolidated businesses? Can I just check, Scott? Where do you work and where have you worked? And he's made some interesting admissions. I think are you suggesting that the heavy lifting of consolidation is mostly done, so everybody else can now go away and drive organic growth? Not sure that's going to work either. As Scott said, I think that everything we've learned today is that the scale of the advice gap is huge. Kathy can't grow enough advisors. Helena did the maths, and I don't know how many pods we said that we would need, but I think it was in the thousands. I don't quite get how you can do that organically. I think you have to acquire businesses, you have to bring them together, you have to create some efficiencies, and when you've got that kind of scale, you can have an advisor academy. Have you ever had an advisor academy, Scott? So I think the problem still is that we're arguing that these two things are in contention with each other, and they're not. We need organic growth, but we also need to recognise that that can only come through consolidated, well-governed businesses. Those two things are not mutually exclusive, they are symbiotic. We can't reduce the costs to serve through innovation alone. We need, and I don't know about this idea that just because you're consolidating a business and integrating them, you can't think outside the box, your leadership team can't innovate. I don't know about you, but when we integrate businesses, we have robust, repeatable processes, so that kind of runs itself once you've done the first couple. So on that basis, I urge you to continue to think, is this realistic? Can we grow organically out of our advice gap? Can we invent thousands of advisors overnight? No, we can't. But can we build and develop the businesses that are already out there and innovate through that method? I'll leave it there.
Fantastic. Thank you to both of our speakers. If we could put up the QR code. Right, time to vote again. Oh. Scott, it looks like you are the proud owner of a dinosaur tail. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you to both. I think that's probably the hardest slot for our speakers. So can I ask for one more round of applause for Scott and Natalie?